Welcome, everyone, to this April gathering space with the Strengthening Evaluation Partnership, Contracting Partnerships Initiative. We are thrilled to be here today with Pedro Paz of Responsive Evaluation Services based in California. And Pedro, you bring a very unique perspective because you've been a funder before. And so you
Yeah.
know what it's like to be both on the funder side and on the independent evaluator side. And
Yeah.
so with that, we really want to talk to you today about what makes funder-evaluator partnerships work. So to start off, can you talk to us about what a funder values in evaluation partners?
Yeah. Again, happy to be here. There are a few things that I think a funder will look for in an evaluator. One of the first things is understanding context, right? Knowing the politics and how findings of an evaluation report or work that you're doing are going to be received publicly. Um, so funders have to respond to reports and especially to donors and board members. And so anytime you're bringing something, if you're staff to a funder, if your staff say when I was at a community foundation, you have to understand the politics are both internal and external. Internal politics, navigating board member expectations, other staff relationships, right? And then the external part, managing relationships with donors who sometimes will look at like, what do you mean this? And you don't have a lot of time to explain it. So when you're putting something together, you have to understand that there is that context that a funder is going to be working in. So when you provide a report, you kind of have to put it in a way that understands that that person is going to have to respond to something. So working really hand in hand to put something together is kind of important in that regard. Second is what they really value is complementary expertise, right? A funder is going to have the expertise of knowing their particular portfolio of what they're funding, right? Their grantees, whoever they funded over the last X number of years. Don't know that. But what an evaluator will bring is a particular expertise on a particular area, maybe a particular expertise in a subject area, and that's what you're bringing to the table, so to speak. You also may be really good in being an expert in a particular geographic area. So if you've worked in a particular geographic area or a certain population that you've worked with, that brings a lot of complementary expertise, right? You bring a cultural competency to the work, right? You understand a population, along with the technical skills you may bring and the methodologies. And then I would say another is reliability,
Mm.
delivering on time, having the ability to document conversations and being dependable. And documenting meaning like you've had a conversation with a funder, well, put it in a piece, in an email that you're going to follow up. And here are the things that I am responsible for doing, and here are the things that you're responsible for doing. I think it's a lot easier to do that obviously now because we have AI, note takers, and all of that. So
Mhm.
it's easy to kind of do that. But that's important too, for a funder, in particular, because they have a lot of things going on and they appreciate you doing that for them. Lastly, I would say constructive framing of results. And I think it kind of goes without saying that sometimes, when you put together something as a critical friend versus a critic, it's received very differently. And a funder appreciates the constructive friend versus being a critical person, right? Um, that's really helpful. Yeah.
That's super. I think something that is really important in the relationship between funder and evaluator is trust.
Yes.
And I wonder if you could talk a bit about how you build trust funder evaluator over time.
I would say, the first thing is start small. And I say that, so if you're going to work on a project with a particular funder you're looking for to do work with, you have to start small with them. You can't expect a funder to say, "Oh, I'm going to fund you for $100,000 or worth of work," and then think that's where you're going to be. It's not likely to happen. And the same, it's the same thing that happens when a funder is looking to fund a particular organization, right? A grantee. Grantees have to approach a funder in the same sort of way. Start small, ask for a small amount, not a big amount. It takes time to build a relationship, right? I would say second to that is be open to conversations, right? Having dialogue, um, and being able to reach out towards to them, have coffee with them. You might start off with sending an email and saying, "My name is such and such. I work for such an organization." And then let them know how you can help. Understand them, right? And then follow up is fine, but not to the point you're sending something every day. I don't think funders have the time to do that, nor do they want to see you in their email stream every day. Like you might want to suggest, hey, let's meet every quarter, or can I have some coffee with you? Can we chat, right? Um, I think that's important. So looking at their website, see what their current funding priorities are, what their areas of expertise are, how you fit into those areas, right? I worked for a community foundation and we had some very set areas that we were funding under our current leadership and sort of our strategic plan. So you kind of want to look at that, right? So you can get your foot in the door. Um, and then beyond that, invest in mutual respect, right? Know the data, know the funders' realities, right? Um, Sometimes you know the programs when you start working with them better than a funder does because you're actually understanding the data.
Mhm.
But I think there is a respect also that needs to be given to a funder in the sense that you are the expert, but also understand that they have an expertise that they're bringing to the table as well. So trying to find that balance is really super important. And then building that long-term relationship with people is also a critical piece as well, right? So it takes time to do all of this. Yeah.
This is super helpful. Something that often comes up are challenges, of course. So as
Yes.
you're building a relationship, who knows what comes up and challenges ensue. Talk to us about how funders and the evaluators or how evaluators can work through challenges with their funders.
Yeah, I think that when you're working with a funder, you're gonna run into disagreements, either as an evaluator or the funder with you in terms of the work. And sometimes, it could be just how you're formatting your report, if you're going to put something down on paper or a presentation. And sometimes it's as simple as it could be a chart, a bar chart, and the bar chart has, it's like it looks really bad, but it's really not because you formatted it the right or the wrong way. We all have been there, right? And so I think working through those disagreements, having conversations with the funder is super important. Again, it's about building that trust, that relationship, um, and not feeling, yes, you are the expert in lots of different ways, but being able to work through that and making sure that you sort of meet in the middle is also important to do that. And then I would say also in terms of that, understand that even when you're working with a larger funder, that they have economic constraints, budget constraints. So I think it's super important when you're starting your work with a funder to be transparent about what you can deliver and what you're not able to deliver, right? Of course, a funder is always going to, just like anyone across the table who's negotiating a contract, wants to get as much as they can for the dollar, right? But I don't think it's not a good idea to overpromise and underdeliver. That puts you in a bad light with the funder. It's better to say, I can't do that for that amount. Here's what I'm doing, right? One of the things that you could do just to kind of get a sense of where people are and how much money funders have previously given to an evaluator,
Mhm.
pull their 990s. You can go to Candid, ProPublica, and look at their 990s and see if they currently are paying a contractor who's an evaluator, right? Um, Another is when you're talking to a funder as an evaluator, provide them a tier of services. Here's tier one, here's tier two, and here's three. And here's what I can give you for this and this and this, right? That gives them the ability to understand what your pricing is going to look like, what you can deliver. And part of that too is that when you're working with funders, you have a variety of different funders. Some people are super knowledgeable and some people are starting off. Much like what you're doing with clients, right? Some people know it. Some people are like, I have no idea. So tell me what I should be doing, right? So this is an opportunity to also educate them, right? I think also be cognizant of timing. Communicate early about deliverables and challenges. Don't wait, like, oh, I didn't want to tell you this because it was going sort of the wrong direction. Well, no, tell them ahead of time. Tell them as soon as you start knowing, even if it's just sort of a running dialogue you're having with people. Don't hide things. I think it's important for a funder to know that because more than likely you're not working, obviously more than likely, you're not. If you're working with a larger funder, you're probably working with staff, not the CEO of the funder, right? They need to know what's happening because they have someone to report to. And even if you are in the unique position of working with a funder and it's a small funder and you are working with the CEO, they have a board.
Yeah.
They have to tell that board what's happening, or they have to convince that board to fund this. So knowing all those pieces is super helpful. Yeah.
I hear people talk about communication, transparency, and no surprises.
Yes, absolutely.
No
You know, I think that's, yeah, it kind of reminds me of a board that I used to work for, and that was their motto as well. Yeah.
surprises. So for the evaluators who've never had an opportunity to work with particular funders with whom they might want to work, could you give advice on how do you break in? How do you get those doors open in the first place?
Yeah, I think what you need to do is look at where the watering holes are, so to speak, for funders. Where are they hanging out? What are they doing? And in our particular where I live in Santa Barbara County, there is a yearly gathering of funders and nonprofits. And I attend just to be seen and talk to people. I'm fortunate enough to know a lot of funders because of my previous work. But they need to know you're available, to know that you can do work for them. That's an example. But also, especially at community foundations, they will have workshops where they're going to talk about their funding for the next cycle. Show up. Even if you're not a grantee or a prospective grantee, show up. See what they're working on. You could also meet prospective clients too on the grantee side of things, right? It doesn't have to be a funder. It can be a grantee that you want to work with as well. So those are other places where you can actually see that, and connect with people.
Mhm.
Also, you probably know more people than you know. So kind of look through your LinkedIn account, look at who your connections are and reach out and just to say, hey, can we chat one time or can we do a Zoom or can we have coffee if you have the physical ability to kind of meet someone?
Mhm.
That's also important.
Mhm.
Um, so the more you sort of leverage existing relationships, that's helpful. Um, I think the last thing in terms of that, is or not. Um, Understand the funder's evaluation philosophy. Because again, going back to the thing I had said previously, some funders are really knowledgeable, others are not. And I think understanding where they're at also helps you to kind of connect with them. So, first thing I would say is have a conversation with the funder, sit down, ask questions about what they're working on, what program evaluation work they're doing, whether their board has had questions to them particularly, right, that they're just not able to answer. Then you know where you can kind of swoop in and be the hero, right? That's really helpful
Mhm.
to understand. And how they go about currently answering those questions so you can kind of help them and be that expertise, right? Look at the funder's annual report if they do put one. Go to the website and look at what they're putting out because most funders will do an annual evaluation report, actually required actually. Um, to do that. So look for that and see what kind of information they're putting out to their donor base or the community at large, right? Third, look at their website. See if they, what their program evaluation is looking like, and see if there's any reports that a grantee needs to fill out at the end of the year for their reporting requirements. Um, and I would also say, AI is really helpful nowadays. Notebook, LM, you can kind of load it up with all kinds of resources for a particular funder and just learn about that funder before you even approach them, right? And understand what they have. So that, leverage that as well, because that's a good resource to kind of tap into, okay? And I would say, lastly, be persistent. If you're not successful the first time, someone kind of ghosts you, don't take it as a no. Funders are super busy when they have deadlines, they have stuff they're working on. Um, Email again, and if you do go to those gatherings that I'm talking about, you could see them in person. Introduce yourself, and follow up with them in that regard and say, hey, I sent you an email, but I'm glad to see you in person. Can we meet for coffee? Do that, right? Um, so yeah.
That's super helpful. Pedro, you've shared so many wise words with us today. I wonder if are there any conclusions or key takeaways you'd share with us as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think, you were uh, talking when we previously talked about sort of the hidden curriculum of working with funders. And I think part of what I was trying to say is that there are rules, unwritten rules. And I would say, some of the things that I always keep in mind is deliver on time, document everything. Funders, again, are super busy. That doesn't mean they don't have responsibility to follow through, but believe me, I've been on the other side of the table and I'm like, oh, what did we talk about? So
Mhm.
document everything. Be present beyond the final report. So be available. Just because you gave that final report doesn't mean you're like, I'm done. Be available to answer questions if they may come up, because they will come up from the funder side. And anticipate what funders need before they ask them, right? I think that's also really helpful to understand, because you may put something down in a report or when you're talking to a funder, say a certain thing. Well, try to figure out how that's going to be, how the uptake is going to happen, not only with that particular staff member, but then sort of through the chain of command, right? Up and down,
Mhm.
right? So anticipate that and think about it. And what they're going to need to succeed and how you can help them get there. I think that's also important as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your thoughts. I appreciate your wisdom as someone who's been on both sides.
Yeah,
Now we're gonna invite people participating in this gathering space to get together and talk on the side about what they just heard, and we'll share any words of wisdom they come back with you.
thanks.